everybody. It's Romania Black, and yeah, we're on chapters 72, 73, and 74 of Scum Villain, and I'm not looking forward to today. Nope, not one bit, y'all, not one bit, because last chapter set we left off with Shen QingQiu having to be punished for his sins. Punished for his crime of failing to raise Luo Binghe's reputation points. And so he was going to just completely be game over, man. And he chose to sacrifice all of his satisfaction points to receive a punishment and go from there. And when we left off from that punishment, he was finding the OG Luo Binghe, who does not love him or know him like our current one does. So, I'm a little bit terrified. We got some things to go through. We got some feral fandom business. We got like one comment, and I got some things to show you all. So I'm pretty excited. As far as the comment goes, I thought Anime Annie did a really good job of pointing out that in the Holy Mausoleum arc, when Shen QingQiu grabbed Zhu Xilong instead of Luo Binghe, Anime Annie was like, you know what, Shen QingQiu brought up a good point that Luo Binghe and all of his relatives kind of dress the same, so it'd be easy to mix them up. And the thing that got me was, oh yes, and in true absolutely stereotypical heterosexual fashion, Shen QingQiu was more focused on their clothes than anything else. First the shoes with Xia Hualing, and now the clothing with Luo Binghe's family. But these demons being fashionable, what are we to do? So, or lack thereof fashion, maybe. But I went back through chapters 69 through 71 today, and I didn't talk about this nearly as much as in the discussion as I wanted to talk about it, but it became very clear to me. I kept saying that like Luo Binghe was a combination of Tianlong Jun and his mom, Su Jingyan, but as many of you have probably pointed out in the comments by now, it also hit me that Tianlong Jun's narrative is similar to Luo Binghe's, with his mom being kind of like Shen QingQiu and being a cool and calculating sect leader, except, you know, you can argue back and forth the differences between Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe's mom. But basically, Tianlong Jun's state that he's in now is similar to Luo Binghe's, and that he's just like, well, this is just how it is, except only Luo Binghe acts way more angrily and furiously about his despair, and Tianlong Jun just kind of like gives up. So it seems like if Shen QingQiu had actually died back in either of the times before when Luo Binghe thought he had, I feel like Tianlong Jun is in some ways representative of what Luo Binghe's state would have been like had it, you know, actually happened. So there's that to look into, which is fun, right? As far as the feral fandom goes, there's a couple from a couple weeks ago that I want to share with you all that have struck my fancy. There's been a lot of fan art posted in the Scum Villain Discord channel. So if you are a patron or thinking about becoming a patron, there's a lot of stuff being shared. There's also a lot of stuff being shared that I'm not going to show you all that kind of goes for all three MXTX stories, and I don't want to put that here because of spoilers, but these are my favorite. Gabadoodle had this really good picture of Luo Binghe and Shen QingQiu as like a 90s yaoi, which I like, the giant hands, the massive hands that Luo Binghe has in that shot, but also his like wavy hair, and he kind of looks like Nephlite from Sailor Moon, which makes me like him a little bit more. So I don't know. I may have had a slight crush on Nephlite, just like Molly, aka Naru, in the original Sailor Moon, just a wee bit, but I thought that one was good. I love any time that Shang Qinghua, aka Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky, gets to get shit on. I love it. So this one of Shen QingQiu about to throw him off the bridge. The bad man punted Baxter. Like, anytime that's about to happen, I just absolutely love it. So Anime Annie shared this one of the healthy way of contemplating and solving arguments rather than castrating Shang Qinghua. So I thought that was really fun. And then apparently, as I'm recording this, and this will tell you how far ahead I'm recording, it is Shen QingQiu's birthday. His birthday is on September 21st, which is actually the day after my own father's birthday. So right on the cusp of being a Virgo and a Libra. If that doesn't describe Shen QingQiu, I don't know what does. Love it. Love it. So I also loved all the birthday art that was shared for Shen QingQiu. I also like this one with the cucumber cake that looks mildly disgusting. I like cucumbers, but on cakes, no. But I think that that's super cute. It's sweet. I like that Luo Binghe is like here, Shizun, take it, Shizun, like lifting it up to him. Amazing. And then this piece here is probably maybe my favorite Scum villain fan art that I have seen in a long time. And it's not just because I like mermaids. It's not just because of that, but there is just, I mean, Luo Binghe as a mermaid looks great. I love the scales, but look at Shen QingQiu. Look how cunty he looks in this one shot where he's like, he's all posed out. I'm assuming he's holding the jade talisman in his hands there, but the green pants, the like tight Victorian pants, like he just looks so damn good. Look at our Peerless Cucumber. I love it. And I think the Little Mermaid theme with Luo Binghe fits so well. It's just really, really well done. So the other thing that I want to show you is that my moderator for the series, Be Happy, talked about like, hey, I sent you some Scum Villain Self-Saving System cards not long back. And I was like, oh, you did, but I couldn't look at all of them because they're spoilers. And she was like, well, you can look at some of them. And I was like, oh, so these were all the many numerous cards that were sent. And I just wanted to show you all my favorites from there. I also like how we have Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe as little dogs, as a dog and a cat, which fits them very well. Cats, dogs living together, what? But these are my top favorites. I personally love that no matter what iteration Shen QingQiu takes, he always just looks like such a diva. They always draw him with like just an air of divaness to him. He's like elegant, refined, but a diva through and through. I love it. I absolutely love it. And then this one is one of my favorites where they're kissing, obviously, in the dream world. That one's really well done. I like that. I also like this one of like the way that Shen QingQiu's eyes are when he's looking at Luo Binghe as a kid hugging him. Like Shen QingQiu has this look on his face like he doesn't deserve it. And I'm like, oh, you do, sweetheart. You do deserve it. But the thing that got me was that in all of these cards, everyone draws Luo Binghe differently. And we've talked about this in the Discord of how whether we do it with straight hair, whether he does the curly hair, whatever. But there's this spectrum that Luo Binghe's artwork goes on where he either looks like a teenage kind of like heartthrob, very innocent, naive. He's on the cusp of being the White Lotus, but he's in the demon realm. And then he just goes into daddy mode. Goes into daddy mode, has his shirt open like a whore, hair's all mussed up, and he looks like he's like wearing 8 layers of cologne. It's just, there's no middle ground. But I did find one shot, and these are a pair. I think they're done by the same artist. I think of all the Luo Binghe ones that I was able to look at in this little grouping, this one's my favorite. I like Luo Binghe because he's handsome, but he also has a lot of vulnerability, like the way his arms are crossed, like he's super broad, but there's a youthfulness about him and this kind of like ennui with him. I really like the way he's drawn. And it matches the vibe of Shen QingQiu here, where he's like kind of delicate and kind of like unsure of what to do and everything. I love that shot of Shen QingQiu. It looks so good. That one's probably my favorite one of him. I absolutely love it. It's just, So these are beautiful, and I can't wait to look at the rest of them whenever the series is over. I've got my little card pack here that Be Happy sent me, and the ones that I can't look at they were labeled as spoilers when I got them, so we're just gonna wait till the end of the series. And when I get through volume 4, I'll look at them on, I'm going to tell Be Happy to remind me as I'm getting closer to the end to look at those before I record the final volume. So that's my plan anyway, but I really, really, really enjoyed them. So thank you, Be Happy, again for sending them. I really appreciate it. They sent me some for Heaven Official's Blessing. As I look through the future audio drama episodes, I'll have to get those out and look at them as well. So, but I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. I'm super excited for this set of chapters. I hope you all are as well. I haven't done this in a while for this particular video set, but as always, each week I give a shout out to my Patreon to thank all patrons for not only sending me those amazing gifts, but also helping me to get the physical copies so I can support the official release of MXTX's works, and because I want to support MXTX any way that I can, but also to thank you all not only on YouTube for subscribing, but also for Patreon as well. It's so appreciated. So, special shout out to my philanthropy tier, which is Alex Cornejo, Anime Annie, Be Happy, our moderator, as well as Bryant Reed, Dana, Danny Don Mai, Devorin, Destiny Marie, Damage 3245, Danger Zone, Ichu, Eric, Elfreya, Lyndon, Ghostly, Turnip, Fisho, Ivan, Matthew Palfinier, Murphew, Nameless Monster, Nicholas, No Nickname, Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, and Translucent Men. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. Oh my. Yep, I've held off all I can do. We're just going to have to dive in and see what happens. So we're going to dive into chapter 72 through 74 and see what happens with old Shen QingQiu's punishment. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 72. And why are you here? Luo Binghe shrugged. Not sure. Or not sure. Then he leveled an unsettling smile on Shen QingQiu. It was a smile like Shen QingQiu was a dog he was raising, and one day he'd suddenly discovered that this dog could say a couple of simple human words. How incredibly funny. His gaze made Shen QingQiu's hair stand on end from terror, because usually it's the other way around. Shen QingQiu believes like Luo Binghe is his dog, and this is the reverse. You're not afraid of me anymore? Luo Binghe said. Well, I'm not afraid of the one out there, but I am afraid of the one in here. Luo Binghe raised a hand and beckoned him. Come here. Oh, and that's what he said before. Oh, in the other Luo Binghe. Oh, if the original flavor, Luo Binghe, and the post-darkening version at that, beckoned you in this way, you would better obediently go, even while shaking in terror. Yet Shen QingQiu still had the courage to attempt a last-ditch struggle in the face of death. However, the moment he turned around, that black silhouette flashed in front of him, blocking his path. A couple more inches and Shen QingQiu would have slammed into him. Shen QingQiu abruptly retreated several steps and narrowly missed falling backward. Luo Binghe grabbed his sleeve with 2 fingers and pulled him back. Why did you run? He asked gently. With that face right in front of him, the current Shen QingQiu could neither bring himself to hit nor genuinely fear its owner. Still unwilling to give up, he kept pinging the system. Is this really the original Luo Binghe? Not my world's Luo Binghe? What should I do to clear the punishment? It can't seriously be to fight him and win. What's the difference between this and sending me back to my original world? Greetings. While the punishment is in progress, Shen QingQiu X'd out the window. Luo Binghe stared at his face for a while and then furrowed his brow. Somehow, I keep getting the feeling that something about you is different. Are you really Shen QingQiu? Shen QingQiu blinked but remained cautious. Luo Binghe surveyed his face, a hint of bewilderment in his actions. Then he slowly took hold of Shen QingQiu's right hand. His palm felt the same as always, both dry and cool. Shen QingQiu's heart stirred just a little, and he was about to say something when suddenly his right shoulder went cold. At that moment, Shen QingQiu didn't feel the sensation of his right arm leaving his shoulder. Oh my God! He only saw something being flung into the air, and half his body seemed lighter. Even then, he didn't fully understand, not until an earth-shattering pain lanced through his entire body and brain. Luo Binghe had torn his right arm straight off. Oh my God! Well, no! Wait a minute! Uh-oh! Having suffered a traumatic injury, Shen QingQiu's body automatically retaliated with a burst of spiritual energy, but a single palm strike from Luo Binghe dispersed it into nothingness. Crimson blood gushed out from his wound, impossible to stem. Shen QingQiu's head spun and his vision swayed. He might have heard someone screaming, or he might not have. His ears were ringing, so he couldn't tell. His only thought was that he had to get away from the person before him right now. He staggered backward, but only after a couple of steps he tripped over a stray stalk of charred bamboo and fell straight onto his back. The pain from the stump where his arm had been was too great. Even the sensation of his head smashing into the ground was lost on him. Luo Binghe leisurely came up to him again. This time, he stroked Shen QingQiu's calf in a gentle caress. Human stick. Oh my god, yep. Luo Binghe was planning to turn him into a human stick. I thought he'd take him back to his palace and do that, but we're just going to do it here. Shen QingQiu was in so much agony he could barely breathe. He grabbed Luo Binghe with his remaining hand and shook his head, disoriented. Gasping and struggling for air, he said, Don't do this. Not with that face. Luo Binghe finally and firmly pressed Shen QingQiu to the ground with a single hand. His gaze could almost have been described as affectionate. This isn't the first time we've done this. So why is Shizun still so unaccustomed? He said softly. Then how about we do it a couple more times, and you get used to it slowly. In that instant, a horrific gut-wrenching pain emanated from the root of Shen QingQiu's left thigh and rapidly tore throughout his entire body. He couldn't take it anymore. He began to scream. Oh, well, okay! So, oh my god, the implication that in Luo Binghe's dreams, the original Luo Binghe, in his dreams, he has made Shen QingQiu a human stick multiple times. And he's like, well, what's wrong with doing it one more time? Chapter 19, Shen Jiu, which is his original self, like Shen QingQiu's original self. Suddenly, the system's monotone voice spoke a notification. Punishment complete. The pain abruptly vanished, and Shen QingQiu violently sprang up before straightaway falling to his knees again. He wasn't even in the mood to roast anything or slap the system. Instead, he remained half kneeling, watching his cold sweat splatter to the ground drop by drop, his vision still swimming with stars. From beside him suddenly came another voice. What's wrong? Only then did Shen QingQiu realize he wasn't alone. It seemed he hadn't returned to the real world. This was yet another dream realm. Oh my god, of course it is. Maybe it's Luo Binghe's, the current one. Moreover, this cavern looked a little familiar. It was the cavern where Meng Mo had lurked as a black fog back when Shen QingQiu had his first experience entering dreams. And the person next to him was indeed Meng Mo. With difficulty, Shen QingQiu managed to compose himself and then asked his own question. How did I end up here with you? You entered an incredibly powerful dream realm. I'm so glad I get to play him again, yes! And your spirit was at risk of being torn apart, so I'd been trying to interfere for a while. This elder tried many times but failed. I only succeeded just now and then incidentally brought you back to this barrier over here. Based on Shen QingQiu's past impressions, Meng Mo hadn't seemed particularly fond of him. That he'd go so far as to recognize a bad situation and even incidentally pull him out of it came as something of a surprise. Many thanks to Senior, he said heartfelt. You truly helped me a great deal. Meng Mo humphed. No need to thank me. This elder was only surprised that the last time in the Holy Mausoleum. You really did manage to persist until that brat woke up. So you've helped him quite a bit too, and helping him also helps me. The incredible agony of having his arm torn clean off was still branded in Shen QingQiu's consciousness, and any moment that face surfaced within his mind, it triggered that memory. Shen QingQiu couldn't help but hold his right shoulder with his left hand. Only after gulping down several breaths did he manage to say that name without his voice trembling. How come I haven't seen Luo Binghe? Logically, the one who most loved pulling him into his dreams, the one who was most enthusiastic about it, was Luo Binghe. Usually whenever Shen QingQiu fell asleep, Luo Binghe came and harassed him, but this time Meng Mo had actually gotten there first and pulled Shen QingQiu into his barrier. The mere thought of Luo Binghe depressed Meng Mo. Well, how should this elder know? From the moment that brat mastered my wondrous techniques, I was never able to enter his dream realm again. All those under heaven, his thoughts and dreams are the only ones this elder is utterly helpless against. Shen QingQiu needed to see that sweet and obedient Luo Binghe right away, or his limbs would keep aching every time that name came to mind. Can that pure-hearted little white flower of a boy please show up right now and soothe me? Well, Shen QingQiu, my how the tables have turned. Meng Mo shot Shen QingQiu a glance out of the corner of his eye. Seeing that his face was green and his lips were pale, he stiffly asked, "That brat will come and find you himself. So what's the rush? Didn't you avoid him like the plague before?" Shen QingQiu looked at Meng Mo, pretending disdain, and thought, does this count as an attempt to comfort me? Having relaxed a little while sitting on the ground, some time passed before Shen QingQiu suddenly recalled something. "Senior Meng Mo, back at the Holy Mausoleum." "Yes! Get back to it!" "I took Luo Binghe eastward with me, and on the way we encountered two people, and one of them was a woman. Did you—" At that time, Chu Haitang had fallen unconscious for a moment. Upon waking, she'd gone crazy for no reason and then fled in dismay. Shen QingQiu strongly suspected that during the time she was out, she had seen something in her dream realm. Since Luo Binghe had also been unconscious at that point, with his forehead burning like a red-hot coal, he couldn't have invaded Chu Haitang's dreams. In that case, Meng Mo was the most likely meddler. As expected, Meng Mo twirled his whiskers. Oh, this elder indeed used a tiny trick. Though he acted indifferent, calling it a tiny trick, his voice held an unconcealable note of pride. Shen QingQiu couldn't help but ask, "What exactly did you show her?" Normally, if Meng Mo wanted to psychologically crush a person, he showed them their darkest, most painful memories. Could he have dragged out of her memories of the Chu massacre? No, that couldn't be. If that had been the case, Chu Haitang's reaction upon waking and seeing Shen QingQiu wouldn't have been as it was. She would have been overflowing with hatred and made to stab him, to pierce his body with 100 holes, so why instead had she cried and screamed before turning around and fleeing? "The memories I showed her," Meng Mo said, "were not hers, but yours." Shen QingQiu instantly understood. The memories of Shen Jiu, which still remained within his body. They had been on his mind ever since Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky mentioned that Shen QingQiu's original backstory, let's get back to this, was never transferred into the novel proper. He immediately asked, "May I request that Senior show them to me?" Meng Mo sent him a glance, but he didn't ask why Shen QingQiu needed someone else to show him his own memories. "You don't remember?" Shen QingQiu had been preparing to bullshit something evasive about how a chi deviation had damaged his memory, but now he nodded correct. It had to be said. Memory loss from chi deviation was fairly improbable. Meng Mo surprisingly didn't interrogate him any further. "Some things are better forgotten. I earnestly request Senior's assistance. You truly wish to see?" Shen QingQiu nodded several times. Meng Mo reached out and pressed a finger to his forehead. "Close your eyes. Wait until I let go before opening them again." Shen QingQiu shut his eyes accordingly. "Your memories are fragmented and incomplete, and you might see people whose features appear blurry or indistinct. Such issues arise from your own self." Meng Mo meant that if there were bugs, the problem lay in Shen QingQiu's personal data files and not his own technique. Shen QingQiu silently counted to 10 and waited until the pressure on his forehead was gone. When he opened his eyes after, a frail-looking youth was kneeling before him on the ground. Hair loose and arms bound behind him with a hemp rope. The youth's face was fair with a pointed chin, his eyes and brows clear and delicate. Yet there was a persistent sullenness in his countenance, and 2 patches of bruising covered his forehead and the corner of his lips. This was the still young Shen Jiu. Back in Huayu City, while escaping Luo Binghe's dream realm barrier, Shen QingQiu had accidentally fallen into one of Shen Jiu's fragmented memories, and this was the scene he'd witnessed. Yes, we've seen this. After a look around, he realized that his rushed glance back hadn't seen wrong. This was a wide room in which a study and a private quarters were connected. A sandalwood moon gate was in the middle of the room, separated the 2 areas, and the room itself was lavishly furnished. The 4 walls hung with beautifully framed art and calligraphy. Only a wealthy family could afford such things. It could not under any circumstances be the den of human traffickers. Shen QingQiu crossed his arms and leaned against a nearby display case, silently waiting. The intricately carved wooden door before him opened without a whisper. Shen Jiu was stiff and unmoving, though his eyes looked up. The approaching person crossed the threshold, their silhouette reflected in Shen Jiu's eyes. It was a splendidly dressed youth. As his features were 6/10 identical to Chu Haitang's, Shen QingQiu knew this must be the Chu massacre's most significant victim, Chu Haitang's older brother. I like that they use fractions to show how closely resembling a person one is. I think that's hilarious. His earlier suspicions had been correct. No matter how you looked at it, during Shen Jiu's days at the Chu estate, he had not been doted upon as Chu Haitang had claimed. The youth leisurely brushed past Shen Jiu and then paced a half circle around him. Shen Jiu's face was tight, his lips pursed. Though his expression was sullen, his shoulders faintly trembled. It was obvious that he was terrified, but forcing himself to appear calm. Suddenly, young Master Chu kicked out, planting his foot right into Shen Jiu's back. Shen Jiu immediately slammed face first into the floor. Young Master Chu sneered. "What, too afraid to hit back this time?" "Have mercy, young master," Shen Jiu said in a low voice, his nose now bloody and smeared with ash. "I didn't know it was you." "You didn't know? You didn't know and you still had the gall to provoke me?" Young Master Chu knocked Shen Jiu to the ground with a single slap, and Shen Jiu's forehead met the ground in a muffled thud. 2 streams of blood flowed down his nose to his chin. Young Master Chu seemed to derive great pleasure from the situation. He was clearly having incredible fun, like he was hitting a ball. Shen QingQiu observed from the side, speechless. A few dozen rounds of this back and forth, and Shen Jiu finally couldn't take it anymore. "Exactly what do you want?" Young Master Chu's smile was terribly malicious. "You're a member of my house now, so naturally I can do whatever I want." Suddenly, a young girl's lovely voice came from outside the door. "Gege! Gege, are you inside?" Apparently my dogs, that was too much for them to hear. Oh my god. Upon hearing his little sister's calls, young Master Chu's expression transformed. As he undid the ropes around Shen Jiu while quietly threatening him, "Wipe your face clean. Say one wrong word and you're dead." Both hateful and afraid, Shen Jiu's eyes flashed with a savage light. Though enraged, he didn't dare speak and viciously scrubbed at his face twice, wiping at the blood and the dust. But who could have known that the more he wiped, the dirtier it would become? When young Master Chu saw this, he grabbed a vase from the windowsill and splashed the water within onto Shen Jiu's face. Then he switched expressions entirely and opened the door, his smile beaming with joy. "Well, what does Tang Air come here for?" Shen QingQiu finally understood how the original flavor's personality, where he flattered you to your face and then stabbed you in the back, had developed. Most probably, he'd picked it up from young Master Chu through osmosis. And we're going to talk about this with Luo Binghe and everything. Chu Haitang was dressed in a light purple brocade, and on her feet were little white satin boots with pearls stitched to the toes. She was likely, truly, like unto a tender young lady who'd been nurtured inside a flower bud, and she possessed a completely different type of loveliness from her future weather-beaten beauty. She walked through the door giggling. "Oh, I heard that Gege purchased someone, so I came to see what they were like." When she saw the youth standing in the corner, she noticed that, despite his listlessly lowered head and how he shrank into himself, his face was still very pretty. Her eyes brightened and she walked over to him, all full of smiles. "So you're Zhao Zhu!" Shen Jiu's face had already been wiped clean, but he remained surly and dour, refusing to answer. Standing behind his sister, young Master Chu's eyes flashed with a threatening light. He smiled. "He's rather temperamental, and he doesn't really like to speak." Chu Haitang moved to hold Shen Jiu's hand. "Well, why don't you like to speak? Say something to me, please." Her voice was soft and sweet, her tone affectionate, and on top of that, she painted the perfect picture of innocence. Lashing out at her would have been unbearable to anyone. Ning Ying Ying, I was thinking of that, was really quite similar to Chu Haitang in her youth, thought Shen QingQiu. So the original flavor, had always been partial to this type. Oh my god! Him relating Ning Yinging to her. Oh my gosh, wow. Initially, Shen Jiu kept his face stiff, but he couldn't resist this sort of young girl's gentle wheedling. With his expression shuddered, he turned his head away, his ears blushing a slight red. At the sight of this, Chu Haiteng clapped her hands. Oh, Gege, he's so much fun! No wonder you purchased him, even though you always hate bringing in outsiders. I rather like him. Young Master Chu smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I too like him very much. Upon hearing the word like, Shen Jiu couldn't help but shiver. At this point in the memory, the scene suddenly darkened. Everyone present likewise shiftily vanished without a trace. Shen QingQiu startled and then realized this is what Meng Mo had been talking about. The memories were cutting off. Since the original flavor's memories within his body were fragmented and incomplete, breaks like this would be common. The previous memory segment had already finished, and now another one would begin. The setting was the same room. This time, Shen Jiu wasn't tied up. He lay prostrate on the floor, his nose bruised and his face swollen, his fingers viciously clawing at the rug to the point that his fingertips were stained with blood. Suddenly, 2 light knocks sounded on the door. A youth's hushed voice called from outside, "Oh, Jiaozhu! Jiaozhu!" When Shen Jiu heard this voice, he abruptly moved and threw himself at the door, his face pressed up to the locks. Oh, Chige! Be a little quieter. I snuck inside. Initially, Shen QingQiu had no idea who the person outside was, but then his thinking switched tracks. Shen Jiu's name was 9, because he was the 9th child taken by the human traffickers. It naturally followed that there must also have been 1 through 8. Oh, and like Jiu means 9, Qi similarly means 7. Oh, however, to think that Shen Jiu, with his personality, had actually managed to make a good friend. This came as a true surprise to Shen QingQiu. From the door came the sound of rattling, like the person outside was shaking it. It's no use, Shen Jiu said. There are 5 to 6 sets of locks both inside and out, and the windows are also locked. The escape failed this time, the youth said worriedly. They didn't do anything to you, did they? Shen Jiu's anger suddenly surged. Didn't do anything to me, he snapped. Are you stupid? They shut me in here for 2 days and they broke both my legs. What do you think? Shen QingQiu could clearly see that although Shen Jiu had taken quite a beating and was unable to walk, his legs were perfectly fine and they weren't broken at all. But that youth couldn't see through the door and seemed to take the claim as accurate. It's all my fault, he said guiltily. Well, of course it was your fault, Shen Jiu said angrily. It's all because of you. We weren't close to the newcomers anyway. So what if he trampled them? Why did you step in? Were you afraid our lives weren't unfortunate enough? If you hadn't stepped in, I wouldn't have helped you. If I hadn't helped you, I wouldn't have provoked him, and the Chews wouldn't have asked to purchase me. And if he hadn't purchased me, I wouldn't have ended up like this, a light beating the 2nd day and a heavy beating the 3rd, smacking me around like a dog. That youth kept saying over and over, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. As expected with Shen Jiu's personality, any friend he made had to be so good-natured that they were painful to watch. After Chige's continuous chain of apologies, Shen Jiu's temper finally managed to cool. Whatever. I don't give a damn about that loyalty crap. Never have and never will. So that single moment was all I've got in me for the rest of my life. You can take it. I understand, the youth said gratefully. Like hell you do, said Shen Jiu, but Shen Jiu said viciously, Huckleberry and Ruby! Quit it. I really do understand. Chige will remember this loyalty. In the future, he'll definitely repay you. What future? Shen Jiu spat. Someone like you, who'll spend his entire life in the hands of human traffickers, you'll just end up a trafficker yourself. That's your future. No, wait, you're too grand of a person. You won't make it. At most, you'll continue with the panhandling. Who is this? I'm so curious. Xiaozhu, I came to tell you this. I'm leaving. So I'm here today to say goodbye. Shocked, Shen Jiu immediately sat up. Leaving? Leaving where? The youth called Chige said, I can't stay here. The Chu family has too much wealth and power in this city. We can't beat them and we can't escape them. There are many cultivation sects in the world. I'll go apply to one. Once I've learned immortal techniques, I'll come back to save you. Shen Jiu's eyes suddenly shone with a dazzling brightness. Chige, they say there's an immortal mountain to the east where they recruit highly qualified disciples every year. Is that where you're going? I don't know, but I'll try them all. Surely at least one will accept me. If I wasn't locked up here, I could go with you too, Shen Jiu muttered. Unbidden, an expression of envy appeared on his face as he stared at the crack in the door. It looked like he was thinking something malicious. Shen QingQiu couldn't help but sweat with worry for the person outside. Some time passed, and then Shen Jiu sighed. Chige, you really got to be less impulsive in the future. You mess up every single time. This time I was the unlucky one. But if you're like this in the future, after joining those immortal sects, what are you going to do? You got to keep calm. He was lecturing someone older than him, and at such a tender age, too. It was somehow comical, yet the other youth didn't seem the slightest bit unhappy. Instead, he said earnestly, I'll remember. Now that he had hope, Shen Jiu's voice became fervent. You absolutely have to remember the things you said. You must come back and save me. Chige seemed to be nodding his head hard. All right, he said emphatically. Wait for me. Once I finish my training, I'll definitely come back. And then we'll leave together. Separated by the door, the two youths fell into a silence. Did you leave? Said Shen Jiu. Not yet, the youth said hastily. I was waiting for you to speak. Chige, come closer and let me see you through the crack, said Shen Jiu, since we don't know how many years it'll be before we meet again. The youth laughed. You wanted to say that you don't know if I'll die out there? Yes? All right. The youth laughed. You wanted to say that you don't know if I'll die out there, yes? All right. Shen Jiu made a dismissive noise. You said it yourself. You can't blame me for the harsh words this time. He struggled to move close to the door and pressed his face up to the crack. Intensely curious, Shen QingQiu pressed himself up to it as well. Through that tiny sliver of a crack, he looked outside. Who is it? Oh my God! I'm so glad! Oh, it's already chapter 74? What? No! No, how is it already chapter 74? What? What the fudge? Shen QingQiu wasn't freaking out over the other person's face. That would have been better, because the problem was the youth outside the door, his face was a fucking blur! No! Like he'd been censored with a mosaic! Meng Mo had told him from the start that there would be a chance of blurred faces and fragmented memories, but now that it really happened, Shen QingQiu felt the burning urge to cough up blood anyway. Oh, great Master Meng Mo, you can't just take a little time to fix this bug? I really want to know what his face looks like. Ah! Right as Shen QingQiu was preparing to charge out the door to see if closing the distance could get rid of the mosaic, the memory cut off again. Oh, so now that's going to be a mystery. Well, this time, the setting was the study. Young Master Chu was writing at his desk while Shen Jiu stood at his side, grinding ink for him. Shen Jiu at this time was still a frail-looking youth, though he'd grown in height and could be considered tall and slender compared to others his age. As he stood there serving young Master Chu, the air of an aloof scholar drifted about him. As the paper neared completion, Shen Jiu said submissively, Young Master, there's something. Young Master Chu didn't lift his eyes. Is this about that Jiu scam artist? Senior Wu Yanzi isn't a Jiu scam artist. Young Master Chu put away his pen and frowned. All you need to do is stay here and behave yourself. Do your part as brother-in-law and live your peaceful life with my sister. What's the point of all these wild fantasies? After a stretch of silence, Shen Jiu suddenly gritted his teeth. Live my life, live my life. I don't want to live that kind of life. Young Master Chu finally raised his eyes and sent Shen Jiu a glance, and then he suddenly kicked the back of his knee. Shen Jiu fell face first onto the floor with a thud. Shen QingQiu couldn't help but rub at his own perfectly uninjured leg. Had the two of them followed this pattern all through these years? Young Master Chu rose from his seat with a mocking smile. To think that the time I spent teaching you over the years, everything you've learned, couldn't compare to a Jiu scam artist's crooked little tricks. Shen Jiu's nose was bloody, but he raised his head and sneered back with an air of arrogance. They're not crooked little tricks. They're immortal techniques. An ordinary, talentless person like you could only comfort yourself by calling him a Zhangzhu scam artist. Young Master Chu crouched down and grabbed a handful of Shen Jiu's hair. Immortal techniques? He asked, tone affectionate. A piece of trash like you actually wants to cultivate immortality? Shen Jiu averted his gaze, wanting to avoid young Master Chu's hand, but the latter only patted his forehead slowly, the action full of ridicule. Smiling, he said, "You don't even count as a human, and you want to be an immortal?" Shen Jiu held his head and remained silent. Seeing that Shen Jiu had wilted, young Master Chu gentled his actions some, his tone heartfelt. "What's wrong with staying here and behaving yourself? Just earnestly doing your duties. You're already 15, no longer young, and even about to be married. The best time for cultivating has long since passed you by. What's there to cultivate? If you stupidly leave with him, he might not even want you." Digging his grave. Young Master Chu was really digging his grave. What the original flavor cared about more than anything else in his life was his cultivation. He couldn't stand anyone's being better than his, and could tolerate others speaking ill of it even less. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hated and envied Luo Binghe to the point of insanity. And this dumbass had actually dared to say that he was without prospects. Well, I mean, means to an end. Shen Jiu violently flung out his arm, grabbed the inkstone at the desk, and hurled it at young Master Chu. From this angle, it also looked like he'd launched it at Shen QingQiu, who unconsciously ducked to the side. The inkstone failed to hit him, of course, and it didn't strike young Master Chu either, but it did splatter the young master's bottom half with a good amount of black ink, completely ruining his beautifully embroidered robe. Young Master Chu's face immediately fell. "Tang Er's fondness for you is several lives' worth of fortune for you," he shouted. "If it weren't for our family, you'd still be on the streets even now, playing a beggar and swindling for a living. That you don't lack for clothes. That you can even read and write when you're only pretender trash. Who gave all that to you?" He slapped Shen Jiu's head to the floor. "Utter ingrate!" Shen Jiu seemed ready to burn all his bridges. "I'm a human," he said viciously. "Why should I be grateful towards a beast?" What admirable courage. With a single strike, young Master Chu flung Shen Jiu into the wall. "And I thought you'd made some progress these past few years, but of course a piece of shit can't be polished." Upon the white wall hung a sword. When Shen Jiu slammed into the wall, the blade fell to the ground. As he sat splayed against the wall, his hand touched the sword. He drew it in his panic and held it in trembling hands, pointing it at young Master Chu and his bloodshot eyes. The young master didn't for an instant believe that Shen Jiu would actually use the weapon. "Still quite a temper you have," he said, pointing back at him. "Your bones itching for another beating." As he came several steps closer, Shen Jiu's soul almost fled his body in terror. "You stay away! You good-for-nothing, you! And after that, you!" Young Master Chu was no longer able to speak. He slowly lowered his head, and the sword had been thrust straight into his stomach. Young Master Chu's face was full of disbelief as Shen Jiu wrenched the sword out. Meanwhile, on the side, Shen QingQiu felt a conflicted kind of thrill. Fuck. This was streaming live from the scene of a murder! The situation had changed in the blink of an eye. A couple short words and this incident unfolded. Shen Jiu was frozen. Young Master Chu covered his stomach with one hand and then forcefully snatched the sword away with the other. He kicked Shen Jiu to the floor and screamed, "Guards!" Shen Jiu quickly threw himself forward and throttled young Master Chu by the neck. While they struggled and fought, several guards rushed in. The moment they laid eyes upon the scene in the study, they began to yell. Both panicked and terrified, Shen Jiu formed some kind of seal, and the sword in young Master Chu's hand shot forward, going straight through the chest of several guards. He turned his head again to see young Master Chu staggering towards him, crimson-stained hand moving to grab his hair. Shen Jiu sent the sword at him once more, this time piercing his lung. He followed up with stab after stab. Using all his strength, Shen Jiu's thrusts became increasingly vicious and his expression increasingly savage. Only after more than 50 stabs, by which point the corpse's face and vital organs had been reduced to a mess of blood and gore, did Shen Jiu finally stop panting. This is probably the first time Shen Jiu had killed a person, and on top of that, the first time he used his own spiritual energy to do so. Having witnessed the incident in its entirety, Shen QingQiu was stunned. Such a brutal first time. For a while, Shen Jiu just stood dumbfounded at the room full of corpses. Then he suddenly came back to himself, the sword falling from his hands with a clatter. As if his senses had left him entirely, he paced back and forth within the study, subconsciously wiping his hands on his clothes over and over. However, his mind was only gone for a moment before he managed to compose himself at a shockingly swift speed. The entire shift in emotional state had taken less than a minute. Such mental fortitude. Shen Jiu steadied himself and then curled one of his fingers, testing. The sword on the ground, still soaked in a horrifyingly amount of blood, slowly rose into the air. It flew towards Shen Jiu. He stared at the blade. A peculiar expression of excitement bloomed on his face before he reached out and grabbed it firmly. He gave the sword a brandish and then left the study with the weapon. Shen QingQiu stood in place for a while until the system sent him a notification. Gentle warning. Please stay locked on the plot hole-filling target. We recommend staying within 10 meters of the target to guarantee full retrieval of the plot line. So, not following the plot hole-filling target meant potentially losing bits of the story? Shen QingQiu quickly followed after Shen Jiu, not daring to fall a single step behind. Shen Jiu had just turned a corner to meet the two rotund, heavy-set guards. With a swing of his arm, a cold light flashed horizontally, slicing the two bloated, fleshy necks together. Blood sprayed as if from a fountain. Shen Jiu killed nearly every person he saw, and the more he killed, the higher his spirits climbed, the sinister smile on his lips stretching wider and wider. Unceasing screams followed him everywhere as he cleanly and decisively cut down some 10 people. Shen QingQiu noticed that he only killed men. Not a single woman fell under his blade. The female servants and maids were all huddled in a corner in the kitchen, but Shen QingQiu didn't go out of his way to execute them. With such clear discrimination between the sexes, he'd made the targets of his hatred extremely obvious. Shen QingQiu was still watching, gripped with alarm and terror, when a sudden scream came from behind him. Chu Haitang stood at the end of the hall, blankly staring in their direction. Blood splattered Shen Jiu's body. He looked like a living ghost, one who was currently yanking his sword out of a guard's neck. Chu Haitang's lovely face twitched several times, and then her eyes rolled back into her skull and she collapsed, falling back into a pool of blood. It seemed like this maiden had always been the type to faint in critical situations. Ha! Upon seeing Chu Haitang, Shen Jiu calmed down a little, and the arm holding his sword dropped to his side. After pondering for a moment, he headed towards the kitchen. Not long after that, a fire began to blaze. The dark clouds in the night sky above Chu Manor were suffused with a searing red like the magma from purgatory. As Shen Jiu dragged Chu Haitang's body into the bushes outside, a person silently appeared behind him. Shen Jiu grabbed his sword and quickly turned around, his eyes ferocious, but when he saw who it was, he breathed a sigh of relief. Senior. This senior must have been the one who'd set up the altar trial within the city. The one who'd kindled and fanned Shen Jiu's treachery. Wan Yanzi. Wan Yanzi gave a soft chortle, not killing everyone. Shen Jiu went silent for a moment. Everyone I wanted to kill is already dead. Actually, one of the points your brother made was correct. It's true you were born with talent, but the best age for cultivating is already behind you. Furthermore, due to the abuse you suffered under him, there's been some damage to your natural bases. A number of achievements should be still within your reach, but if you wish to become one of the best, that's no longer possible. A few years earlier and things would have been different. If this man had heard young Master Chu's words, he must have watched the disastrous incident from beginning to end. Yet he'd had no intention of interfering and only instead watched on from the sidelines. It looked like this senior wasn't an especially gentle sort. If Shen Jiu really did leave with him, he likely wouldn't walk a bright and just path either. Before Shen QingQiu had thought that this body's qualifications were already incredible, to have formed a core in only 10 or so years when he'd begun to cultivate so late. He never would have predicted that Shen QingQiu originally could have gone even further. Faced with this truth, even a person devoid of ambition like himself couldn't help but sigh and lament. So, it wasn't hard to understand why the highly competitive original flavor had always brimmed with vindictive bitterness. After all, having something and losing it, as opposed to never having it at all, would leave a person even more resentful. Veins bulged on the back of Shen Jiu's sword hand. "That beast wasn't my brother," he said coldly. "Besides, did you offer me any other option?" That person had already turned around, but when he saw that Shen Jiu still was standing before Chu Manor gates, he asked, "Not even leaving now? Who are you waiting for?" That "who are you waiting for" was a rhetorical question asked without meaning, intended only to urge him on. Shen Jiu turned his head to gaze at the towering inferno consuming the Chu estate, and his eyes seemed to blaze along with it. The Chu servants who'd been lucky enough to escape death scrambled and fell over one another as they fled. Amidst the wails and screams, only Shen Jiu's ash-white figure stood firmly before the gates, the gold-red flames behind him flickering and weaving in their wild dance. The fires of the Chu estate burned hotter and brighter, and the rafters lurched and collapsed. Faintly carved upon Shen Jiu's blackened, soot-covered cheek was a thin, pale track. He forcefully flung his sword forth, hurling it into the sea of flames, and turned around as well. No more waiting. Shen QingQiu had always known that the youth who promised to return to save him would never come back. It was only illogical, wasn't it? This was a well-known flag, and together with that line, "Let's get married in our hometown," was known as the half of the flag duo. If anyone vowed that they would definitely come back or be back right away, it was guaranteed that you would never so much as seen a shadow of them again. These two children really had been too naive, too optimistic. As long as Chige visited each sect one by one, he'd definitely find one willing to accept him. Completely wrong. Even if he did happen to get accepted and managed to succeed in his studies after several years, he would have seen more of the world and gained many more things to worry about, so there was no guarantee that he'd return to look for his childhood companion. Furthermore, the Zhonghu was unpredictable, and all kinds of disaster could unfold. Therefore, the chance of that youth actually returning to rescue Shen Jiu had been less than 5%. However, now that the plot hole had been filled to this extent, Shen QingQiu understood a little of why airplanes shooting towards the sky had taken an axe to the outline. When written within the bounds of the original genre, this kind of character was extremely difficult to handle. You could say he was scum, but he was also pitiful. If you tried to acknowledge his pathos, his ruthlessness was real too. Characters that were both scummy and tragic always drew aggro, and they were a hotbed for wank leading comment sections to devolve into massive flame wars. Better to hack him down into a formulaic asshole than let the protagonist step on him. Easier to write, and the readers would find it satisfying as well. Meanwhile, Chu Haiteng was completely innocent. All through that incident, she hadn't done anything wrong. But with a deep love came an equally deep hatred. It had ground a naive, pure-hearted girl into a calculating, bitter, and vengeful woman. Her death in the Holy Mausoleum was even less deserved. If anything, her ending in the original Stallion novel would have been happier. If only he could have given her a hand back in the beginning. Shen QingQiu was still sighing when the scene suddenly began to flash with black and white static like an old television. The setting and faces distorted into something unwatchable, while the sounds became crackling noise and gibberish. The system sent out a notification: incomplete memory warning. 5% of full dataset lost. 7% of full dataset lost. 9% of full dataset lost. Oh, the memory fragmentation was spreading further and further. As the percentage of data loss grew increasingly large, Shen QingQiu violently smacked the notification window, just like how he'd helped fix the TV's poor connection when he was little. After a couple of dozen smacks, it actually worked. When the percentage loss hit 10, the notification alarm abruptly ceased. The scene's static vanished as well, becoming clear. Only then did Shen QingQiu breathe a sigh of relief. He let go and backed up. He'd yet to stand properly when his eyes widened. Crouching only a couple steps in front of him was a young boy. That fair and tender face was smeared with several streaks of dust, probably accidentally left there when wiping away his sweat. A red string was looped around his neck, a jade guanyin dangling from it, and tied to his back was a ragged cloth bundle patterned with tiny flowers. Currently, he was diligently scratching at the ground in an attempt to dig a hole. Luo Binghe? Shen QingQiu blurted out. Little Luo Binghe didn't hear him, but kept zealously digging his hole. When Shen QingQiu looked around, he found that they were in a vast canyon with hundreds of boys and girls of varying ages, dressed in all sorts of clothing. Each and every one was pouring all their efforts into digging holes. Understanding dawned on Shen QingQiu. He raised his head and looked up. Sure enough, above the canyon loomed a steeply projected rock face, and upon it stood two people. One person was dressed in dark-hued Jean-Duan robes, his bearing calm and composed. His focus was on the hundreds of people in the canyon below him. The other person wore a sword at his waist, and he twirled a folding fan between his fingers. Teal robes the color of emerald seas fluttered slightly in the wind. His face was subtly raised as he squinted downward, his attitude like that of one who couldn't be bothered with the ants beneath him. This was Yu Qingyan and Shen QingQiu. And this was the scene of Sangjiang Mountain's recruitment trial, the year when Luo Binghe entered. Yes, you really didn't see wrong. The trial's objective was digging holes. Though Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky had used many paragraphs and author notes to explain that digging holes wasn't just about digging holes, using this simple exercise they could assess the digger's stamina, speed, perseverance, spiritual energy circulation, and even moral character, etc. But Shen QingQiu couldn't remember a single justification. In his heart, no matter how many explanations Airplane bullshitted, it didn't change that the whole thing was just digging holes. The Shen Jiu of this time had already ascended the position of Qijing Peak Lord. A rule of Sangjiang Mountain was thus: the 12 Peak Lords moved as one, meaning that all their successions and departures were conducted in unison. The inauguration ceremonies were likewise always performed for a group, and the decision to retire was even more so united. Even if a Peak Lord met an unfortunate death during their tenure, their position remained empty. Back when Shen QingQiu had faked his death and vanished for 5 years, Qijing Peak's seat had remained vacant as well, so Peak Lords of different generations never led together. This made certain extraordinary situations even more troublesome, but without a generation gap, the emotional bonds and sense of camaraderie between the Peak Lords were much stronger. Interesting! With this thought, Shen QingQiu couldn't help but mentally jump to another rule. After confirming their succeeding disciples, the senior generation of Peak Lords always gave their heirs new names, based on their generational character to highlight their special status. There are many possible names that began with this generation's character, Qing, but Shen Jiu just had to end up with QingQiu, like the world was truly out to get him. Shen Jiu hated the character Qiu to the bone, yet the name was bestowed upon him anyway. How couldn't he choke on the bitterness? Even Shen QingQiu couldn't stop himself from wanting to coddle the man for 30 seconds. No wonder the original flavor felt little gratitude or respect towards the previous Qijing Peak Lord. Shen Jiu and Yu Qingyan appeared to be engaged in discussion upon the rock. Shen QingQiu glanced at little Luo Binghe, who was engrossed in his task. He gave his head a couple of phantom pats. And then leapt onto the rock face to stand next to the duo, listening in. There's even more people here this year compared to past trials, said Yu Qingyan. Shen Jiu squinted, his expression devoid of anger or joy. With a subtle shift of his 2 fingers, the fan in his hand slightly opened. From the side, another person approached and bowed to Yu Qingyan. Zhangmen Zhizhang. This person completely ignored Shen Jiu, who stood next to them, his eyes about to overflow with resentment. Besides Great Master Liu, well, who else could have had that much arrogance? At this point, Liu Qingge's formal ascension to Baizhan Peak Lord, too, had likely only happened a couple years ago. See, I thought, okay, real quick, I thought originally when we were doing the whole Qige thing, that I thought that Liu Qingge was the friend. And because it's gay, it's Qingge in the name, and there's Qige. So I thought it was him. I could be totally wrong, but that's who I'm thinking it is, and he just didn't come back for Shen QingQiu. But who knows? And maybe that's why he killed them in the original novel. Who knows? But anyway, I wanted to get that out, get my theories out. We'll go back to it in the discussion. There was a visible air of immaturity about his features. His gaze fierce and sharp, and within his every action was a young man's spirited vigor. Excellent timing, Liu Shidi, said Yu Qingyang. Why not take a look and see who's best? Liu Qingge only needed a glance to say, well, talent-wise, him. Shen QingQiu gave a satisfied nod. Great Master Liu had a good eye indeed. The one he pointed at had his back to them, and it was diligently digging Luo Binghe. Does Liu Shide want him? Asked Yu Qingyang. Those who wish to come to me will come themselves. Oh, well, that's pretty can't be bothered picking. Oh, Yu Qingyang, you're just waiting for the strays to show up at your doorstep, huh? Baizhan Peak had always been the same. Come or don't come. Do as you please, but if you come, prepare yourself for a beating. Anyone who waited around for others to take them as their disciple had no future or place on Baizhan Peak. The ones who took the initiative to come to Baizhan Peak themselves, screaming and crying and begging to be beat up. Shen Jiu said mildly, good talent doesn't guarantee success. Liu Qingge didn't even grace him with a sideways glance. But certainly more success than a nobody who only began proper cultivation at age 16. Sure enough, these two had never been able to see eye to eye. At all. Oh, what if it's him? What if it's them? Oh, we're going to talk about in this discussion. What if it is him? Liu Qingge disliked speaking, and he disliked speaking to people with whom he didn't see eye to eye even more. Yet for the purpose of taunting Shen Jiu, he actually managed 15 words. That his own current relationship with Liu Qingge wasn't too terrible was practically a miracle. Liu Shidi. Yu Qingyang's tone was full of reproach. Liu Qingge had no interest in being lectured and turned to leave right away. I'm going to practice. He departed without a second word, coming and going like the wind. Shen Jiu stood stiffly in place, shaking in rage at Liu Qingge's insult. Two sharp cracks sounded from the fan as he squeezed it, his grip overly forceful. Liu Shidi isn't good with his words. Yu Qingyang's tone was resigned. You've always known this, so you must not mind him. Shen Jiu humphed, his air sullen and spiteful. He seemed about to say something when Ning Yingying clambered up. Oh, Shizun, Shizun, she called, flinging her arms around Shen Jiu's waist. Will Yingying get a shimi or shidi? When Shen Jiu looked at her, his face somewhat relaxed. Would you like a shidi or a shime? Ning Yingying nodded several times. Shen Jiu raised his head and opened his fan, giving it a couple of waves. He squinted to himself, starting to plot something or other. And suddenly he spoke, I want that child. He was staring at Luo Binghe. And Yu Qingyang startled. Because it's just like the brother Chu. It's just that repetitive cycle, right? That generational trauma. The original Flavor's unsavory track record in terms of his treatment of highly talented disciples had probably long since spread throughout the entire sect. Now, he'd asked his sect leader for a promising young sprout. So Shen QingQiu could understand Yu Qingyang's hesitation. It really required some careful deliberation. Upon seeing Yu Qingyang's reluctance and lack of answer, Shen Jiu coldly repeated himself, I want him. Speaking to even your sect leader that way? Well, that'd be asking to be hit. Shen QingQiu couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Unexpectedly, Yu Qingyang slowly nodded, giving his consent. All right. Shen QingQiu was utterly speechless. To think Yu Qingyang could tolerate even that. Exactly how had this body of his safely survived to this day? And then there was Great Master Liu. So the reason behind the original Flavor wanting to snatch up Luo Binghe for himself at all costs was the seed of disaster that you planted. Ning Ying Ying cheered and ran down the rock, heading into the crowd in the canyon to grab Luo Binghe. In the original text, this was the opening scene of where Luo Binghe entered the sect under Shen QingQiu. However, because it had been made from the male lead's point of view, Great Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky hadn't written the interactions between the three peak lords in detail, with all their subtle undercurrents. Instead, the passages started right from a sweet-smelling young girl descending from the sky, suddenly coming to take Luo Binghe with her. Well, surely upon reading that opening, every single reader had the same thought as Shen Yan back then, that this would be the start of the male lead's godly and unstoppable good fortune, both in love and in general. They hardly imagined that it was actually a crumb of sugar before a grand parade of 300 stabs. Shen QingQiu knew what awaited Luo Binghe next, but he could only continue watching helplessly. Watch as Luo Binghe followed Ning Ying Ying until they arrived at Qijing Peak's bamboo house. Watch as Shen Jiu sat in the seat where Shen QingQiu always had, a teacup in hand, scraping at the tea leaves. Shen QingQiu quickly set the chittering Ning Ying Ying away with an excuse. Mingfan stood behind him as he spoke in his place. Starting from today, you will stay on Qijing Peak. Little Luo Binghe's face was flushed red with surprised joy. He knelt to bow, form prim and proper, and then said in a crisp, bright voice, "Disciple Luo Binghe greets Shizun." The corner of Shen Jiu's mouth twitched, and he finally lowered the teacup from his chin. His words slow and measured, he said, "Tell me, why did you come from Sangjiang Mountain sect?" Luo Binghe nervously yet earnestly replied, like he was reciting from a book, "This disciple has always admired the many immortal masters on the mountain, their persons and demeanors both. If he can enter the sect and find success in his learning, this disciple's mother in heaven will be able to find peace." Shen QingQiu knew this was an answer that Luo Binghe had devised on the road, one that he tossed and turned and polished unceasingly. Shen Jiu made a non-committal noise. "You had a mother?" Demeanor cavalier, he asked. "What was your mother like?" Luo Binghe raised his smiling face, his eyes shining brightly. "Mother was the kindest person in all the world to me." Shen Jiu's face twitched, and he raised a hand to stop him. He looked at Luo Binghe up and down once. "Indeed, you are at the best age for cultivating." Shen QingQiu saw three things on the original flavor's face: envy, envy, and more envy. Envy that Luo Binghe had a mother who was the kindest in all the world to him. Envy of Luo Binghe's talent. Envy that Luo Binghe would enter Sangjiang Mountain sect at the best age for cultivating. He was indeed the kind of person to brim with envy and resentment toward a young child. Shen Jiu stood and walked over to Luo Binghe, his steps measured. Shen QingQiu inadvertently moved to shield him, but how could he stop anything? Luo Binghe raised his face and watched as the Qijing Peak Lord approached, his expression like that of a boy gazing at a celestial god. But who knew at the same time that that celestial god would walk right by him without a glance? At the same time, Shen Jiu casually tossed the tea in his hand, cup and lid and all onto Luo Binghe. The tea wasn't freshly boiled, the temperature only hot instead of scalding, but Luo Binghe's entire person still froze, stunned. Mingfan's footsteps padded after Shen Jiu, who'd walked out of the bamboo house without a second word, hands behind his back. But before the former stepped out the door, he yelled behind him, "Kneel! Shizun hasn't allowed you to get up. If you dare get up, be warned that you'll be strung up and beaten, and after the beating, you'll be shut in the woodshed for 3 days." For the first time, Shen QingQiu realized that in terms of talent in digging his own cannon-foddered grave, that child Mingfan had really deserved full marks. Having just entered his apprenticeship, Luo Binghe had been full of joy and gratitude, but now that he'd been splashed with a head full of tea for no reason, his heart had been wholly chilled and quenched, as if he'd taken a bucket of ice water to the face, complete with ice cubes. He blankly remained kneeling in place, eyes unblinking. During this silence, 2 teardrops rolled down his cheeks. Damn it. This was Luo Binghe's first cry since he personally buried his mother. It would also be the last time he cried at Sangjiang Mountain sect. After this, no matter what humiliation he suffered, no matter what Shen QingQiu did to him while he vented his twisted feelings, Luo Binghe's tears never failed never fell unrestrained in the way they did today. Shen QingQiu crouched before him, but when he raised his sleeves, they passed right through Luo Binghe. He was unable to touch him, unable to hug him. He was completely helpless to even wipe away his tears. His heart ached and throbbed to the point that he wished for death. Despite knowing Luo Binghe couldn't hear him, he still said, "Don't cry, huh?" Luo Binghe stared down at his knees, and his fists resting on his legs slowly clenched. His tears dripped faster, the drops splashing onto his lapels. "Shizun will never hit you again." Shen QingQiu fruitlessly wiped at his cheeks and coaxed him, "So don't cry." Luo Binghe raised a hand and rubbed at his eyes, and then carefully picked up the teacup on the ground before placing it to the side. Clutching that jade pendant to his chest, he corrected his kneeling posture. Shen QingQiu knew what Luo Binghe was thinking at this moment. Surely he hadn't understood the rules, and he'd done something wrong, angering the Peak Lord, and that's why he was given this punishment. As a disciple, kneeling for his Shizun was also something that he should do. Looking at those subtle movements of his, Shen QingQiu couldn't help but kneel as well, so that they were face to face. He reached out, tightly enveloping the entirety of Luo Binghe's small body in a phantom embrace. His eyes slid shut and the world descended into darkness. When he next opened them, what filled his vision instead was a white bed curtain, and his corners decorated with tassels. At the sudden change in scenery, Shen QingQiu froze in place, surprised and unable to react, at least not before he heard Yu Qingyang's voice beside him. "Awake?" Shen QingQiu mechanically blinked a couple times. His throat felt a bit dry, but he forced out his voice. "Oh, Zhang Xiong." Yu Qingyang was sitting next to his bed. He watched Shen QingQiu for a while and then said, "You kept calling Luo Binghe's name." "Oh," while crying. Shen QingQiu wiped at his face. Other than sweat, he did in fact feel another type of liquid. The tears were truly infectious. After a pause, he guiltily said, "Oh, Shizong, let me explain." "Explain what? What kind of convincing reasoning could give for the reality that was the Qijing Peak Lord was crying while calling his disciple's name in a dream?" At the sight of Shen QingQiu unwilling to speak, Yu Qingyang sighed. "It's fine. It's enough that you're awake. No need to explain." Shen QingQiu awkwardly sat up. Suddenly, he thought the scene was a little too familiar. The first time he'd awoke in this world, Yu Qingyang had also been at his bedside watching over him. That's right. Yu Qingyang studied his complexion. "You slept for 5 days. Do you wish to continue sleeping?" 5 days? Shen QingQiu just about fell over right there. Plot hole filling completion rate for target, Shen Jiu, 70%. Only 70% complete? Wait, other than the 10% lost due to the incomplete memory incident, where was the remaining 20? Where had it gone? There was no time to give it more thought. Shen QingQiu first grabbed Yu Qingyang. "Zhang, the first day of snow, the low river." Realizing that he was too agitated and his words incoherent, Shen QingQiu composed himself, transforming his expression into something calm and stern. "I mean, that it's highly probable that Tianlong Jun will choose that time and location to use Jinmo to create a portal where he begins to merge the two realms." "How do you know?" said Yu Qingyang. Shen QingQiu was stuck again. How could he say that it was because it had been written in the original text that these would be the most suitable time and location? "I was in Tianlong Jun's hands for a while." "And he told you just like that?" Shen QingQiu couldn't come up with an explanation on the spot, so he could only forge ahead. "Please, Zhang Xiong, you have to believe me." Yu Qingyang gazed at him for a while, and then closed his eyes for another long moment. Afterward, he stood up gently and said, "Rest first. Leave this issue to your fellow sect members." "Rest? Did he mean sleep? Shen QingQiu had already slept for 5 days. Only proud immortal demon Wei would shrug at the idea of a cultivator at core formation stage sleeping so much. I dare you to try writing this in another Zongdian literature novel. The author would be mocked until even his mother couldn't recognize him." Once Yu Qingyang's footsteps faded, Shen QingQiu tumbled off the bed, searching everywhere for his outer robe. As he spun around haphazardly, he failed to notice someone approaching him from behind. A hand covered his eyes. Shen QingQiu automatically stuck out with his elbow. Well, who is it? Who else would have the guts to play such a stupid trick, let alone the interest? His hand was firmly caught in a grasp, and a familiar voice spoke by his ear. Why doesn't Shizun guess? What was the point of guessing when he'd already opened his mouth and called him Shizun? Shen QingQiu was rolling his eyes when the person behind him suddenly grabbed his waist, causing them both to tumble onto the bamboo couch to the side. Its bamboo twigs cracked under their combined weight. The object blocking his eyes moved away. Sure enough, it was Luo Binghe. That hand moved to cover Shen QingQiu's mouth instead. Don't blink. Shizun's eyelashes are so long. They tickled me too much, and now both my hand and my heart are itchy. You're the one with long eyelashes. The person with the longest eyelashes is you. Shen QingQiu continuously blinked dozens of times, expressing his anger. Luo Binghe smiled and then kissed his eyelids softly. Don't shout. If someone from Qijing Peak discovers us, Shizun's prestigious reputation would truly be ruined. What reputation? It had been long since ruined by this unfilial disciple. Luo Binghe kissed his way down Shen QingQiu's eyes. I said that I would come for you. It's been so many days since our last meeting. Did Shizun miss me? According to the standard response Shen QingQiu had in mind, first he should knee Luo Binghe in the belly, then kick this unfilial disciple away and tidy up his appearance before finally delivering a cold and aloof, well, I didn't. But somehow, when he thought back to that recent memory of Luo Binghe kneeling alone in the bamboo house, silently picking up the teacup on the floor, his leg wouldn't obey him at all. Shen QingQiu's breathing also seemed to tremble against Luo Binghe's palm. He closed his eyes and nodded. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! I need a fan. Well. Oh my god! It's fine. Oh my god. All good things are best repeated in threes, as the system tells us. I am just, wow, this chapter set brought it all together. And there's still mystery. It still establishes a mystery of who Chige is, which I have two theories. I think there are three possibilities. I'm leaning more towards one of two theories, but I think that there's possibly a third option. So we need to talk about that. Maybe even a fourth option. Maybe even. I've got some theories, okay? So bear with me. We're going to be doing theory time throughout this chapter set, but wow. The generational trauma and the cycle of abuse is so front and center in this chapter set. Oh my god. And so there's a lot to go through, so we need to dive into it. But before we do that, I want to go to and see what chapters 72 through 74 are titled. Chapter 72 is called The Person Named Shen Jiu. It can get kind of confusing because we have three different Shins. We have Shen Yan, which is who is actually now in Shen QingQiu's body. We have Shen QingQiu, who is also Shen Jiu. So we have basically two different people in this story, but they're all inhabiting the same body, right? Three different names, two different people, one body. As if that's not confusing at all, right? So do what you will with that. So that's chapter 72. Then it goes to chapter 74. Okay. Wait, what? Chapter 74 says right on schedule, which is like everything, which is the giant chapter is chapter 74. Okay, the giant chapter that's 74, right on schedule, is the one that has everything happening with Luo Binghe getting chosen and all of that. I want to jump back to that, where, what do they say there? Reiki made a comment saying, Chapter 73 is missing from the list, but don't worry. You don't miss anything. I'm just following 7C's chapters. What? But why is Chapter 73 missing? That's so bizarre to me. Okay, I'm assuming Reiki's like, it's no big deal. I was so curious because Chapter 72 is going along, and then suddenly we're in Chapter 74, and I was like, what? Why do we not have that? But it's literally not in this either. So, what? Is this something meta? Is this MXTX being meta and being like, oh, 10% of the story is missing, don't mind me, ha ha ha. And they're like intentionally, or you know what? I'm sure this isn't it, but I wonder if Chapter 73 is going to come back up in Volume 4, like as one of the extras, and MXTX is going to be like, hey, remember how there wasn't a Chapter 73? Here's why, and it's going to bring it up. Maybe. I'm going to trust that Reiki was like, don't worry about it, and 7Cs didn't include it for a reason. I'm sure we'll figure that out as we get to it. Very curious, very curious. So, okay, we'll let that go for now. But we need to talk about this chapter set. We need to talk about the OG. Get myself here. The OG story, as it were. And then where we're at in the new story. Which the biggest difference is Shen QingQiu. Is the biggest difference of all. What I really loved about this chapter set was the fact that Shen QingQiu, who has read Proud Immortal Demon Way from the beginning, going back to see things that were kind of like behind the scenes. A lot of this chapter felt like, because I do like writing and coming up with stories. And in the back of your head, if you've ever wrote something before, whether it's fanfic or otherwise, you have your story, but in the back of your mind, you're always thinking of other little things behind the scenes that are influencing what's happening on the page. And as a writer, you can either do one of two things. Either it all becomes subtext and it's never really fully explained to your audience, but there's an author's vision in the background that's just kind of simmering like an outline, or it's information that you, the author, are going to supply to the audience later in a different form. It's just when you're writing the story, now's not the time to talk about it. And my dogs were so crazy. Every time there was like a small dramatic moment, my dogs were like, let's chase each other and bark at each other. And I'm like, what can we do? But, or it feels like as an author, you're going to come back and talk about it later, right? In the case of the Proud Immortal Demon Way, though, what ends up happening is that Shen QingQiu, or Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky, had this whole outline planned for Shen QingQiu's character, but then was like, yeah, that's going to make Shen QingQiu really complicated. Nope. And you're like, damn it, no, why did you get rid of this? But I have a theory behind some of that I think is going to tie into this. And we just need to get to it, but we're going to get to it and do this. But let's talk about the punishment. He does indeed get turned into a human stick. and Luo Binghe in this version did not wait to take Shen QingQiu back to the castle. Did not wait to do anything like that. He was just like, well, let's just do it right here and now. The scary thing is that Luo Binghe in the OG version, he's like, well, this isn't the first time we've done this. So why is Shizun still so unaccustomed? How about we do it a couple more times and get you used to it slowly? So essentially, what we find out in the OG version is that the OG Luo Binghe has been going to the dream realm and taking out his aggression on Shen QingQiu multiple times is basically what happens. So instead of, basically he's been making Shen QingQiu a human stick multiple times in the dream realm. What's interesting about that in comparison is that in the new realm, the new Luo Binghe, instead of hurting, instead of Shen QingQiu getting hurt, he's committing self-harm all while lamenting Shen QingQiu. That's a really big difference. So the Luo Binghe in the past had only been abused by the OG Shen QingQiu, so all he knew was to take that anger and aggression out the same way that Shen QingQiu had taken it out on him. And so he was just doing that in his dream realm. But this Luo Binghe, who is used to his Shizun's kindness, but is just really confused about why Shen QingQiu was acting weird, he didn't want to take it out on Shizun because he loves him. So instead, he took it out on himself and committed all this self-harm. And it's like, oh my God. So again, showing the impact that Shen QingQiu had, or Shen Yan rather had, in that moment versus back then. So it all ties back to this idea of cycles of abuse. That is a major theme in this story. And MXTX does it really well between, especially the further we get into the story, because on the surface, you're like, oh yeah, it's just about cycles of abuse. Yeah. But the further we get into the story, the more she reveals it through Shen QingQiu, and the more it's like, oh my God, yes, all of this is it's so intricately laid, and she's been feeding us breadcrumbs, and now we're getting to the main course, and it's like, oh my God. And Shen QingQiu, aka Shen Yan, is seeing this all for the first time, like in full, and seeing the behind the scenes stuff, and he's like, oh my God, this is, oh, well, I could see why Shen Yan. And a lot of a lot of Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky's decisions as a writer now make more sense based on that original outline, which we'll get through here. But I felt so bad for him. Like, to imagine like getting your limbs ripped off, even if it was a punishment. So that was the punishment. That's what you traded. You didn't die in real life, but the person you love got to rip off your limbs. Hope you're having a great time. And Shen QingQiu was like, shit. I'm so glad we got Meng Mo back. I did not anticipate Meng Mo. It's so weird. We are a good solid portion into this book. We got 3 more weeks of volume 3, and then we only got 1 volume left to go after that. So we don't have a lot of content left. And I'm like, oh my God. We do get 3. We went 2 weeks without pictures, and then they give us 3. And I'm like, really, book? You had to just feast or famine, right? This shot, though, of Shen QingQiu getting his, like, you can barely see it, but his arm's been ripped off by the Luo Binghe of the current timeline. Oh my God. Poor Shen QingQiu. All 3 of these images show Shen QingQiu in various stages of distress. This is the first one that we get. We'll talk about the other 2 here in a little bit as we go, but... So he wakes up, and is in the second dream realm. It's like he's coming out of Inception. He was in the deep punishment level. Now he's on the surface level, and then he wakes up. Or at least we think he wakes up. God, who knows at this point if it's a dream or not, but I'm assuming it's real. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so he wakes into this next dream, the dream closer to reality, and Meng Mo's talking about it. What I find interesting about all this is Meng Mo's just kind of like, if you can't beat him sort of situation where he's like, well, I can't make Luo Binghe listen to me, and he's using my techniques. I might as well make sure that my techniques are being used properly, so we'll just let this go. I'm honestly amazed, because I thought going into this series that Meng Mo would be a much more sinister presence. I thought going into this series, Meng Mo was going to be like the big baddie. No, he's just a portable grandpa that shows up every now and then. He's like, whippersnappers, how's it going? And you're like, what? So again, MXTX, she makes you think something's going to go down a certain way. And then she's like, actually, no, not really. And you're like, oh. So he's just there being like, hey, I'm just trying to help out Luo Binghe because helping Luo Binghe helps me. And if that means I have to help you out, enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess we'll just roll with it. And Shen QingQiu's like, okay. So we come to find out that the reason Chu Haitang had such a reaction back during the Holy Mausoleum is because of Meng Mo, showing her a certain memory. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, how about we go back to that memory? What did you show her? And I am so glad that Meng Mo showed up so we could catch back up with what we were cut off with back at the Holy Mausoleum. MXTX is threading these, all this stuff is coming together. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, well, let's go back to that memory. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, yes. He's like, I used a trick and showed her a memory that was yours because you were there. And that's how it all went down. So he's like, do you really want to see? And he's like, yes, I do. I think that what's interesting is both Meng Mo and Yu Qingyang both question Shen QingQiu of being like, but why? Because you're Shen QingQiu. Both of them have a moment where Shen QingQiu has to kind of lie and say, well, because Meng Mo is like, well, but shouldn't you remember all these memories because you're Shen QingQiu? And Shen QingQiu's like, I can't tell them that I've been transmigrated and isekai'd into this moment. So he's like, no, I don't remember. And he's like, okay, I guess I don't blame you. Who would want to remember this? So here you go. And then with Yu Qingyang, he's like, well, you know, don't you remember how you were? You're awfully different than you once were. And Shen QingQiu's like, look, are we really going to do this? So it makes a lot more sense, right? It makes more sense. But anyway, so he ends up showing him the memory, and so we go back to... Guys, can we just give a toast to Shen QingQiu having to endure watching this? Shen Jiu is honestly, his whole evolution into a villain, I'm like wanting to kick Airplane shooting towards the sky because I'm like, this is the type of villain that I love. I mean, obviously he's a Scum villain and the stuff he does in the novel is deplorable, but I love a villain that has complexity to them, that has reasons and has all this motivation. And even if you hate what they do and you dislike them for it, you can still look at their character and go, damn, that's a really good character. And so it's such a pity that Airplane was like, everybody just wants me to make him an asshole and make him more simple, so that's what I'm going to do. And it's like, oh, it's such a disservice, right? But in the OG, there was I'm just going to put Chubro here. He abused Shen QingQiu until Shen QingQiu, or Shen Jiu in this case, lashed out and killed him. And I don't want to put SY because that, to me, that's Shenyan. So he basically lashed out and killed him, which, you know, ties in a way to the idea that it creates this cycle, whereas thus Shen QingQiu abuses Luo Binghe, and then Luo Binghe lashes out and kills, essentially, Shen QingQiu. So it's just this big cycle of violence. This big cycle of violence. And it just doesn't help anybody. Everybody's miserable and nobody benefits from it. What's interesting to note is I really liked the idea that Chu Haitang, she was this innocent little girl that didn't know any better. She just thought all the stuff she said back in Jinlan City was not necessarily a lie. She just didn't know the full story. And she never understood why things were the way that they were. Honestly, it reminds me of a moment in Berserk. And I'm not going to spoil that moment entirely, but there's a moment in Berserk very early on in the manga where the main character, he stumbles across this man that is very corrupt and has made some really bad decisions. You find out why he makes those bad decisions, and you kind of feel for him a little bit, but he makes some really bad decisions and does some really bad, deplorable things. His daughter never finds out the full extent of what he did, and at the very end, our main character has to kill, or he's kind of put up in a wall where he's essentially, the old man dies. The father dies. It's kind of the protagonist's fault. And the daughter, who doesn't know the full story, she gets mad and kind of vows vengeance against our protagonist. Case in point. The same thing kind of happens here, where Chu Haitang, she doesn't know the full story. She only sees the aftermath and how it all comes to a head. And then she gets mad and bitter and vows to get revenge on Shen QingQiu. And that's where we're at. It's also really crazy to note that when she talked about them being married, I was thinking of like Shen QingQiu in his 20s of them being married, but no, Shen QingQiu or Shen Jiu was 15. 15. No one in their right mind should ever be married at the age of 15. Your brain doesn't stop developing until the age of 25. So you know what? You probably should wait. You probably should wait till you're 25, then get married afterwards, and then your brain will be fully developed and you'll have a full consciousness and it'll be great. But no, that's not what happens. I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't realize it was that early either. And that kind of changes my perception of the whole marriage situation between them, because he was just a kid. He was just a teenager. And now you look back at Shen QingQiu being this, like, this angry and lashing out teen versus Luo Binghe, who at the abyss has the same moment of breaking. The only difference is he waits 3 years before coming back. And you know what? To give Luo Binghe credit, to give him credit where credit's due, Shen QingQiu lashed out at age 15 and killed a man and several others brutally, and then left, and then it started this bitter campaign where he just ascended into darkness and bitterness. And at least Luo Binghe, because of Shen QingQiu, aka Shen Yan's influence, he doesn't necessarily lash out. He tries to win him back. So these chapters, and showing just how scummy the original Shen QingQiu became, they make Luo Binghe look a lot better, in a much better light. And I'm telling y'all, I would get here eventually, but y'all just have to have faith in me. Everybody was all mad at how I was treating Luo Binghe back in volume 2, and I was like, look, you just gotta give me time to get here to where you all are on the same page. So be patient. But case in point is that he just can't take it anymore. And it's horrific. And Shen QingQiu's just sitting there like, oh shit, he just murdered everyone. And the concept of him just stabbing the Chu brother until he's like a bloody pulp. I was getting some flashbacks to Heaven Official's Blessing and another scene where a character is stabbed with a sword until they're a bloody pulp, but it's under slightly different circumstances. I won't spoil any more, but y'all can comment about it down below. But yeah, so then here's the mystery. The mystery of who Chige is. Chige means 7. And I'm like, okay, 7. I'm not going to dig too much into Chinese characters and what they mean, because I feel like once I do, it will reveal who it is, and I don't want it to be given away. Of course, they give us the image. It's like Frozen, do you want to build a snowman? Outside the door. One thing I want to give props to the artist of this series. The artist supplying the illustrations, who is the artist? I'm going to look up. The illustration is Zhao Tongkong or Valinci. You do an amazing job, by the way, because they make Shen QingQiu, even as a kid, look super consistent. And I thought that was really impressive. But yeah, of course we don't get to see who it is. They have a bun and some features. They look like they're bigger than Shen Jiu. So there's that. Here's my theory of who this might be. I got 4 theories. 4 possibilities of Chige. Put them over here. So Chige, we got 4 possibilities. Let's line them out, shall we? Option 1 is Liu Qingge. Why do I think Liu Qingge? I think he's the one I think most for a couple reasons. 1, because he has gay in his name, not just gay, but he has Chige. He has it's Liu Qingge. And we have to remember, this is all a story written by airplane shooting towards the sky. So the nomenclature, if you're like, well, that seems really on the nose and obvious, because it is, right? Hear me out. I think it could be Liu Qingge for a number of reasons. 1, because of the name, obviously. 2, because in the original story, if we recall, Liu Qingge dies. Liu Qingge is killed by Shen QingQiu, right? That's the original story. So if you were a writer and you had a character that was set up to have all of this history with your main scum villain, aka Shen QingQiu, and then suddenly you decide to axe that plot, well then you probably don't need that character anymore. So you'll be like, oh, well, we're not going to get into all that with Shen QingQiu, and this could have been like a giant plot or a side thing. Let's just get rid of him. We'll just get him out of the story, and then we won't have to deal with it. And then no plot hole, everything's fine, right? So a couple things. One, you have the idea, and Huggleberry is not going to let me get into my nice tangent without throwing this toy. So here's my theory. So I think that originally, Liu Qingge, he went to Bison Peak. He got accepted in because they established that Bison Peak is where pupils go if they want to get beaten up and they want to, and he was like, but here's the thing, he probably doesn't recognize Shen QingQiu and everything because Shen QingQiu lied, Shen Jiu lied and said his legs were broken. Well, Shen QingQiu in this, his legs work perfectly fine. So Liu Qingge probably wasn't even thinking about that. He's like, well, you couldn't be Shen Jiu even though you have a similar name because your legs aren't broken. Your legs are perfectly fine. So there's no way you could be him. So couldn't possibly be, right? And by the time he went back to go find him, he was already gone. So there's that. So plus the whole thing at Jinlan City, by the time all of that information in the OG novel comes out about Shen QingQiu from Chu Haitang, by the time all the information and dirty laundry about him comes out, Liu Qingge is already dead. So he wouldn't have been able to figure out that it was him. So there's that. So I think that originally, Liu Qingge was originally the Chige who grew up with Shen QingQiu. And originally that was going to become a big plot point because then you have the undercurrent part where Shen QingQiu's like, when we start the story of Proud Immortal Demon Way out, we don't actually get to see the conversation that happens between Yu Qingyang and Shen QingQiu up on the mountain. We don't get to see that. But the whole thing about Liu Qingge and the original Shen QingQiu having this like antagonism towards each other, that's just damn poetry. That's just enemies to lovers. That's just like, oh, you were childhood friends, but then you forgot who each other were and you didn't know it was each other and you became enemies. And then later you find out and it's like, that's a damn love story. That's if Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky's original plot was to have this be a BL, that is like straight up a Don My Alley, right? But because he changed his mind and decided not to do that anymore, he completely axed the plot line of Shen QingQiu and thus axed the plot line of Liu Qingge and just got rid of him and then wasn't needed anymore. That's my theory. I think that Liu Qingge is Chige. And I think it's going to come back at some point in this story. But by this time, Shen QingQiu's already fallen in love with Luo Binghe, and poor Liu Qingge is going to be like Zhang Cheng from Madao Zushi and is going to go, well, screw it. What do I do? But that's what I think. That's my strongest. I am like 70% convinced that it's Liu Qingge. That's my theory because it all adds up. It all makes sense with the fact that he wasn't originally supposed to be in the novel. And now we have this mysterious character who was written out as well. I think it's not coincidence. I think it's all connected. But those are my only theories. So if it's not Liu Qingge, could it be Yu Qingyan? Could it be him? This one's like 2%. I don't really think it's him because I think he's already established at the time. But I'm just putting it in there because who knows? Maybe. But that's a possibility. Which also would kind of work out because he ends up getting written out of the story. So also with the bun in the picture, I think there's a possibility it could be Shang Qinghua who ends up becoming who was the friend that got away. But I think that's a pretty slim chance too, but also he gets killed out of the story as well. So all these possibilities, they all get killed in the OG story. They could all be him just to write out that plot point. I don't know. It would be interesting. I think that if it was Liu Qingge that was Chige, it's going to be so angsty because Liu Qingge is going to be like, oh my God, Shen QingQiu, it's you. I've looked all over for you and everything. And then Shen QingQiu is going to be like, yeah, so I'm not in love with you. I'm in love with Luo Binghe. At least if it was, here's the thing. Another thing that made me think possibly that it was Yu Qingyan is the idea that Yu Qingyan always supports Shen QingQiu, always goes along with whatever he wants, always agrees. Maybe he's figured out that who he is and he thinks it's him and he's trying to repay him for not coming and rescuing him. I don't know. Could be a possibility. If it's Shang Qinghua that's actually Chige, that would kind of work out because now that airplane shooting towards the sky has transmigrated into his body, he doesn't like Shen QingQiu. So that could all work out as well. But I don't know. The fourth possibility is it's someone else. The fourth possibility is it is a to be determined person that we don't know yet. So that could be. We'll just have to wait and see. But MXTX revealing a mystery character in the 9th hour of this book, of course she would. Of course she would. But it's a mystery character, but my theory is it's somebody we already know. And they just had a secret past with Shen QingQiu that airplane shooting towards the sky isn't going to reveal until possibly volume 4. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. So I think it's Liu Qingge, personally. Which would also kind of like romantically tie into him always like coming after Shen QingQiu and trying to rescue him. Also always coming back when he's not there. That would all tie into it. Like he went to the city at Huanhua Palace whenever Shen QingQiu was leaving, so he just missed him. He went to the Holy Mausoleum afterwards and just missed him. It would all make sense to me if it was Liu Qingge, but we're just gonna have to wait and see if it is or not. But yeah, so of course, Meng Mo and the memory does not show him who it is. It's like, how dare. But yeah, Shen Jiu, he ends up just murdering the brother Chu and all of these guards and everything. I'm like, The thing that's so frustrating is that we go straight from chapter 72 to chapter 74, which starts with WTF. So I'm like, I'm so curious about the lack of chapter 73, but I know maybe we'll find out by the end. So if it's something that's going to spoil something later on, I don't want to know. You all can just say, we can't talk about it yet. You'll just have to wait and see. And that's good enough for me. Good enough for me. But it's so weird. It's so weird. Because I've seen other stories like Berserk that have missing chapters, and those missing chapters end up being rather important. So I'm like, we'll just wait and see about it. So yeah. So anyway, what ends up happening is that Shen Jiu, he kills the brother, and then poor Chu Haitang, she ends up being traumatized. And so I like that the system is like, hey, you need to follow him. You need to follow Shen QingQiu and Shen Jiu through this dream. Please stay locked on the plot hole filling target. We recommend staying within 10 meters of the target to guarantee the full retrieval of the plot line. And Shen QingQiu was like, okay, fine, I'll do that. So then we get to actually meet the senior, which is Wu Yanji. And he seems like he's been knowing Shen QingQiu for a while and influencing him behind the scenes, which kind of reminds me of how in the OG Meng Mo was influencing Luo Binghe behind the scenes. So there's this kind of idea of Wu Yanji and Meng Mo influencing the two protagonists. So in this case, Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe for their own goals. And we kind of talked about what those were back in the Jianlan City arc. So interesting. I mean, the part that got me about the end of this is that as like, again, I wish this was animated so badly, because the idea that as Shen Jiu is walking away, he's left behind this just like blood everywhere, murder. He chucks the sword back at the building, which is interesting. He didn't, Zhuya is not the sword that killed everyone. He chucked that sword back. He didn't take that murder sword with him. but it's just like the house ablaze and everything, and him leaving it behind, and there's like the tears streaming down his face as he knows that what he did hurt him, because the one girl, the Huai Tang sister, like she was the one person nice to him, and he just left her in the sea of blood. It's messed up. It's pretty damn messed up. And Shen QingQiu's like, okay. That's kind of the crazy thing is we talked a couple chapters ago about the original Shen QingQiu and how it was kind of sad because if he originally had any type of attachment or affection towards Luo Binghe in the original story, then that Shen QingQiu will never be able to enact on those feelings because Shen Yan has transmigrated into his body and taken over. But honestly, at this point, I don't think it was going to happen because the damage was done. I think everything, like they said in the book, through osmosis, through his experiences and his abuse, Shen Jiu, he was just so corrupted and so far gone that I don't think he was ever going to turn back around. I think his fate was pretty much sealed by the time that the end of Proud Immortal Demon Way happened. I don't think it was going to alter. So, as much as it sucks that the original Shen QingQiu will never be able to have that redemption, I think this was a sign that Shen Yan coming into his body is the savior of his character, because his character was just going down such a dark road, and Shen Yan doesn't have that experience, so he kind of ends up saving his character from becoming a human stick, right? But that line, no more waiting, it's exactly the same as Luo Binghe when he was up on the temple being like looking at Shen QingQiu being like, you're not giving me the answers I want. I'm just done with it. Fine. It all makes sense. It's the same thing. It's like, oh. Like to see it from this perspective makes you realize just how bad it was for Shen QingQiu's character. At least Luo Binghe had Shen QingQiu who was nice to him for a time. So then he's like, you know, Shen QingQiu talks about the idea that youth was probably never coming back. He's like, oh, well, if he went to every sect one by one, he'd surely find a village to accept him. Well, it's not that easy. And furthermore, even if he did get accepted, there was a chance it was less than 5%. But I'm like, as MXTX has taught us, 5% is just enough for a thing to happen. If you know another MXTX story, only takes one. Only takes a 1% chance, and it's still possible. So I feel like, and the fact that we started with the incomplete memory warning of 5% data set lost, I feel like MXTX is setting us up that we're going to see Chige again. Possibly. I could be wrong. We could never see them again. Who knows? But I feel like we're going to. I'm holding out that it's either Liu Qingge or somebody else. But I think we're going to see him again at some point. That's just my opinion. But so, okay. So with the plot hole filling components, 10% of the data set was lost. The memory was fragmented. Shen QingQiu beats on the system like you would a TV set, gets it to stop. And then we literally go into the plot of Holes. All I could think of was the movie with Sigourney Weaver in it. I love the book Holes. It's so good. I read it in junior high. I loved it. But all I could think of is just the idea of holes. And then I love that Shen QingQiu kind of digs at airplane shooting towards the sky, being like, yes, this was supposed to have some very, very symbolic meaning to it, but let's be real. That's so funny to me where he's like, no. So then we get them up on I love getting the perspective of Yu Qingyang and Liu Qingge and the original Shen QingQiu as they're choosing their successors. Now, in this moment, we know as the audience from Shen QingQiu telling us in the past that Liu Qingge normally did not choose a partner, which again ties to my theory that he's Chige because he never chose a partner because the last time he had Shen Yan or Shen Jiu rather end up getting his legs broken, and that had an impact on Chige. And it wasn't until Shen QingQiu told him that he should take a partner on again that he actually did it. So that's another reason for the theory. Put that down on the conspiracy board, right? So we find out that Shen Jiu hated the character Chu because it was tied. Now it all makes sense, tied to Chu Haitang and all of this. It's like, oh my god. So yeah, airplane shooting towards the sky just made it like the worst decisions. Like all the decisions to make Shen QingQiu's character be like the most bitter, the most angry at everything. I'm like, what did you think he was gonna do, right? But I also love during all of this, Shen QingQiu's down there like wanting to give little head pats to Luo Binghe. I'm like, after everything that Shen QingQiu has been through during this chapter set, the fact that he accepted Luo Binghe's kisses at the end, I'm like, yes, sir, accept those, because you had your arms ripped off. You watched the character that you transmigrated into go through hell. You watched people die. You watched this scene. You've watched Luo Binghe being tortured when it wasn't you, and you know that you couldn't do anything about it, but it was in a body that you're inhabiting. You let him kiss your eyelids, sir. You let him give you pecks on your eyelashes. You just let that happen, sir, because it needs to happen. I'm like, oh my god. Yep. So, in any case, Liu Qingge was so interesting. It says his formal ascension to Bison Peak had only happened a couple years ago, and he was immature about his features, his gaze fierce and sharp, and every action was a young man's spirited vigor. Well, if he just became Peak Lord a few years ago, and Shen QingQiu became a Peak Lord around the same time, the ages would match up for him to be Chige. It would match up. It would all fit the timeline. And them kind of being immature and yelling back and forth at each other and bickering. I'm telling you, that's my theory. That's my theory. I think I'm on to something. We'll see. I'm connecting the dots, and all of you watching this are like, you didn't connect shit. And I'm like, I've got the dots connected. I figured it out. But we'll see. So it's like those who wish to come will come themselves. And so what's interesting is what I like about this is that Liu Qingge is like, I'm not taking on disciples. They'll come to me if they want. What an elitist and kind of like posh thing to say. When he said that, I was like, oh, you can't be bothered. I was just like, they'll come find me if they want to be my disciple. I'm like, oh, well, sir. Not beating the allegations of being shady. I'm just saying. But Liu Qingge is like, well, there certainly is more success than a nobody who only began proper cultivation at age 16. So I'm telling you, the fact that the story is like they'd never seen eye to eye, I feel that Shang Qinghua, maybe Shang Qinghua originally was like, it wasn't supposed to be a love novel between you and Luo Binghe. I originally wanted it to be a love novel between you and Liu Qingge, and then I changed everything. Maybe that was it. But that would also kind of tie and be kind of cool, because then Shen QingQiu could be like, no, I'm not having a relationship with Liu Qingge like you originally planned. I'm going to be with him because that's my choice. Maybe. Who knows? Again, we're going to see where this story goes. But yeah, those words really got at Shen Jiu. And then Yu Qingyang is like, now come on, guys, let's stop fighting. And then he just runs away. And Shen Jiu only takes on Luo Binghe to spite Liu Qingge. And then there we go. What also makes sense now is that Ning Yingying, she originally was a lot like Chu Haitang, so that's why he favored her a little bit, which is kind of sad, because originally I was so disgusted at the original Shen QingQiu because of how he treats Ning Yingying, and so was Shen Yan. But now that we know the backstory, and it's like he only was like that to her because she reminded him of the one nice person in his life, it's like, oh, now I get it. Okay. But anyway, so he's like, so this was the reason behind the original flavor, wanting to snatch up Luo Binghe at all costs, the seeds of disaster that you planted. And what sucks so much is we see Luo Binghe like a little puppy. He's just sitting there being like, I would just wanted to become part of the sect to help my mom's memory and all this. And what does Shen QingQiu do? Same thing he did at the start of the novel, where he went and dumped the tea. Now it has even more meaning, even more angst, even more heartbreak. And you're like, it sucks so much. And the original, that was my thing too. The original Shen QingQiu was so envious. He couldn't see past his envy. And I don't think there was ever going to be a chance for him to care about Luo Binghe the way that the current Shen QingQiu cares for Luo Binghe. And there was never a chance for the current Luo Binghe to become what this Luo Binghe is, because it just was the cycle of generational trauma and abuse. And Shen Yan came through and broke that cycle. Not only by saving Liu Qingge, by saving Yu Qingyan, but by saving Luo Binghe. Like, Shen Yan doesn't give himself a lot of credit, but our Peerless Cucumber, his acts of kindness, despite his peacock sass, have altered the course of the entire story and saved all of these characters from a horrible fate that airplane shooting towards the sky created. So Sheng Qinghua, you're gonna have to own up to some of this at some point, right? At some point, because in the end, Shen Yan becoming Shen QingQiu ended up saving these characters. I felt like by the end of this chapter set that we were getting close to this point here where they're going to come to terms with one another. I feel like we're not ready to pop the cork yet and celebrate, but I feel like by the end of this, it was like, nope, this is going to be the start. And the idea, what I thought for a second was that when Shen QingQiu kneels down and like puts Luo Binghe into an embrace and he tells him not to cry, my heart just broke. I was like, Shen QingQiu being like, don't cry, it'll be okay. You know, Shizun's never going to hit you again. Don't you cry. And I was like, oh my God. Because he's just like, no, he's like, nobody's going to hurt you anymore. It's okay. It's not going to be like that. And what I was wanting more than anything was that in this moment, I wanted this to kind of transition from not only being Shen QingQiu, the dream that he's in, but also to be a dream realm where Luo Binghe can see the other side of it and see him do that. Oh, I wanted that so badly, but that's not what happened, but it's just as well, right? Because I want to say the damage was done, but instead what needed to happen happened. And Shen QingQiu has not only seen why the person that he transmigrated into was the scum villain, but he saw not only how that can create a cycle and transfer to like characters like Luo Binghe in the original book, but he can also see why characters like Luo Binghe would have lashed out the way that he did because of the abuse that they had faced. And that's what needed to happen. This chapter set was so hard and so heartbreaking, but it needed to happen. This is what I've been waiting for this whole time, and we're finally here. So he wakes up, mind you, in nearly the same way he wakes up at the very beginning when he first transmigrated. And I'm like, is this just creating butterfly effects? Is this just creating ripples throughout the novel, throughout the systems? Is this going to be like, is this going to affect something on the other side of the world? Is somebody else going to transmigrate into the story because of it? We don't know. But it's been 5 days, and that's when the system says the plot hole filling completion rate for target Shen Jiu is at 70%. So there's still 30% left of 30% of Shen Jiu plot hole filling. 30% left. And so we know 10% is missing, is MIA or fragmented. So that leaves 20%. I feel the 20% that's left is about Chige. I feel the 20% that's remaining is figuring out who Chige is. And once we do that, then the plot hole is it's all gonna come together and wrap up. Once we figure all that out, it's all gonna tie together. And then Shen QingQiu will be like, oh, okay, now we've filled that plot hole and figured it all out. I feel like that's what's remaining. I'm assuming, just like with the binding rope and the jade pendant, it's all just going to be stored and completed as we go. Kind of like when you play a video game and you have side quests and you get like 70% of the side quests, but you keep moving on to other side quests and you come back and fill it later. I feel like that's what it is. The system didn't say, oh, you have 30 minutes to complete the 20% or you're going to die again. It just said, the rate for target was 70%. It didn't give him any other advice. So we're going to assume that that's the case. But Shen QingQiu says the first day of snow, the Luo River. He's like, that's probably where Tianlong Jun is going to go to create the portal and merge the Tomb Realms. And honestly, Yu Qingyang is very right to ask, well, how do you know? And Shen QingQiu's like, well, how do I tell him without telling him I'm the character in a book? So he's just like, I was with him for a while. And he's like, and he told you just like that? And Shen QingQiu's like, well, he does think I'm in a threesome with Luo Binghe and his cousin. So sure, why not? You know? Okay. So I feel like he's just kind of like, you have to believe me. And Yu Qingyang is like, I feel like Yu Qingyang is like, I want to believe you, but we need hard evidence. So you just settle down. Or he's suspicious and he's trying to figure out how he knows. I don't know. I can't read Yu Qingyang, so I don't know what to think about him yet. Anyway, so I also love that Shen QingQiu is like, only in a novel like this could characters that don't need to sleep have to sleep. He's like, airplane shooting towards the sky. What the fudge are we doing? Why? It took me a second to realize that someone had put his hand over Shen QingQiu's eyes. I thought for a second that Shen QingQiu had bumped into somebody and like grabbed him, but it was the other way around. And then it's Luo Binghe. And oh my God, after seeing Luo Binghe rip off Shen QingQiu's limbs, and after seeing him going through all the trauma, and after seeing Shen Jiu's trauma, Luo Binghe just popping in being like, oh, it's so glad to see you, Shizun. I told you we'd meet up again. You didn't lie to me. Is everything okay? Was like the biggest smack to the face gut punch of fresh air. I almost didn't believe it was really happening. And I was like, are we about to have actual good things happen? Because this whole chapter said it's been lots of bad things. And I was like, oh my God, we're actually about to have good things happen. Holy shit. And that's exactly what it is. Also, Shen QingQiu being like, don't tell me my eyelashes are long. Your eyelashes are long. Your handsome eyes. I was like, Shen QingQiu, how dare you? How dare you? And then when he's like, don't shout. If someone discovers us, your prestigious reputation will be ruined. And Shen QingQiu at this point is like, what reputation? And the romanticism of Luo Binghe kissing down his eyes and just kissing across his face, and Shen QingQiu wanting to kick him in the belly and wanting to push him away and say, no, I don't like you. And then going, you know, seeing you crying as you were kneeling after I threw that tea on you, and after I've just witnessed all of this abuse and trauma and how it negatively affects people and how it sticks with them even years and years afterwards, and you thinking that you're doing something negative and it doesn't matter, but then it comes back and it did matter. No. And so as Luo Binghe has his hand over his mouth, he's just like, he just nods. Like, yeah, I did miss you. After all that I just went through, yeah, I did miss you a lot. And that's so sweet because it's not a Stockholm Syndrome thing. Again, it's actually, I understand now. Some people were like, I don't know about the Beauty and the Beast comparison. And I do agree with you all. There were moments in volume 2 where the Beauty and the Beast comparison, I think, worked on a surface level. But now that we're here, it's not just a Beauty and the Beast. It's definitely not Stockholm Syndrome. But rather what it is something a lot more complex and layered. And it's that Shen QingQiu has not only realized Luo Binghe's kind of innocence in a lot of things, but also has realized why he acted a certain way, what led up to those actions, why his original character acted in a certain way, what he's been trying to, the reputation he's been trying to uphold. He's like, I don't need to be doing that anymore. I'm me. I'm Shen Yan. I'm Shen QingQiu now, but the Shen QingQiu of the past is not who it is now. And he's like, I can admit that I'm happy to see him and it's okay. And it works. It's so organic. It works. Oh my God. It's so great. I'm like, it's just so good. And I've talked for nearly an hour about this. So, oh my God. Also, this chapter cleanly lets off. Like, it ends. I'll show y'all. it ends right at the end of a segment. Also, the other picture we get that just breaks my heart into a million tiny little microscopic pieces is Shen QingQiu hugging Luo Binghe. So good. So good. So good. I don't know if I'll use all 3 of these pictures for the thumbnail because we get Feast or Famine. We get 3 all at once. I may use the picture of Luo Binghe with Shen QingQiu getting his arms ripped off, and then the one of him hugging Luo Binghe as a kid. And I may save the picture of him with Chige until we figure out who Chige is, and then come back and use that for the thumbnail. I might, if we figure out who it is. We'll see. We'll see. So, holy shit, this chapter set was amazing. It was all of the information we needed. We still have 3 more chapter sets to go in this volume. MXTX, you can't predict the roller coaster. You just can't. So, anyway, next week we're going to be looking at chapters 75, 76, and 77 of this series. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear your comments down below, but I feel like several of you have probably been waiting for us to get to this point, and we're here, so yay. And I'm sure all of you saw my theories and went, ha ha ha, foolish mortal. And to that I say, we'll just see what we get. So, in any case, I hope you all have an amazing week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of Scum Villain Self-Saving System.